In this final episode, we will talk about the history and animals found at Horton Plains. During the early months, the temperature can be quite low at Horton Plains. But with clear skies, it's also the best time to visit this park. Generally, January and February are the dry months at Horton Plains. During this season, the midday temperature is about 27 Celsius, while the nighttime temperature can be 5 Celsius or less. During these months, ground frost can be seen. But as the heat intensifies with the rising sun, the frost will gradually melt away. In these grasslands, the only frost-resistant woody plant is the rhododendron. Thanks to its garish, red flowers, the rhododendron is one of the most notable trees at Horton Plains. Ibn Battuta, who climbed Adam's Peak in 1344 AD, also referred to this flower in his book. He stated that there were many evergreen trees and flowers of various colors, including a red rose as big as the palm of a hand. In the late 1800s, Henry William Cave produced several books about Sri Lanka. One book, published in 1900, provides an early glimpse of Horton Plains. This picture, taken around 1900, shows the path from the western shoulder of Thotupalakanda to Horton Plains. Cave wrote that before the railway extension, these plains were so isolated from human interference that animals like deer, wild boar, and even leopards lived in large numbers. Cave also took this photograph of the rest house at Horton Plains. At the time, this was the only accommodation in the area. Later on, this building became the famous Far Inn. Today, this same building functions as a visitor information center and museum, which is operated by the Department of Wildlife Conservation. But back then, it functioned as a lodge for overnight visitors who came to Horton Plains and was popularly known as the Far Inn. The building was named in honor of Thomas Farr, a British planter who lived near Horton Plains. Farr was a hunter too, and spent a great deal of time hunting sambar deer at Horton Plains. Harry Story's book, published in 1907, includes a whole chapter written by Thomas Farr about hunting sambar deer at Horton Plains. In 1901, Farr also wrote an article about sambar hunting at Horton Plains. The article includes illustrations that show how his hunting dogs attacked sambar deer. At the time, Farr and other hunters used specially bred dogs to hunt sambar deer. Interestingly, the article also states that Thomas Farr was the leading elk hunter of Sri Lanka for 25 years. This picture, taken from Harry Story's book, shows Farr with his hunting dogs at his residence at North Cove. Though Farr later returned to England, his ashes were scattered at Horton Plains after his death. According to Thomas Farr, around 1890, rainbow trout were introduced to the waters of Horton Plains. Hence, the plains also attracted anglers. From the 1880s to the 1970s, the Ballyhul Oya and neighboring network of waterways above a certain elevation were stocked with rainbow trout from hatcheries nearby. Interestingly, no native species of fish are seen at Horton Plains. However, it's likely that some native fish species existed before the introduction of trout. Consequently, the introduction of trout to these waters affected the stream ecology, leading to a gradual decline of native freshwater shrimp due to predation by rainbow trout. Not only shrimp, amphibians, and crustaceans may have been affected too, yet the abundance of trout continued to attract fishermen to Horton Plains till recent times. However, these trout are vulnerable too. Studies have shown that the otter is a major predator of trout and have been observed feeding on fish. Yet overall, it's questionable whether otters have a significant impact on the trout population here. Also, these waterways were disrupted in the 1960s when anicuts were built to obtain water for seed potato cultivation at Horton Plains. It's said that the resulting fertilizers and pesticides that were used in the farm ruined the water quality. During the 1960s, around 1,000 acres at Horton Plains were used for seed potato cultivation. Consequently, the cattle manure that was used to fertilize potatoes contained seeds of fodder grasses from overseas, and these grasses were more aggressive than the native grasses. So after the cultivation project was abandoned, the exotic grasses took over and began attracting sambar deer. After the potato cultivation stopped, the lands were occupied by exotic grasses that became a favorite of the sambar deer, thereby providing sustenance even when other grasses are unavailable due to senescence. Furthermore, a research conducted in 2003 about the food habits of sambar deer confirmed their appetite for exotic grasses. In fact, the sambar deer is the most commonly seen animal at Horton Plains. The sambar deer is the largest deer in Sri Lanka, and they were extensively hunted during the British colonial era. At the time, this animal was referred to as the elk. Due to their abundance, these plains were also called the Elk Plain. Currently, it's estimated that there are between 1,500 to 2,000 sambar deer in the park. This is ideal for the Sri Lankan leopard, since their main prey are sambar deer. Due to the misty conditions and dense vegetation, seeing a leopard at Horton Plains is quite difficult. However, a sudden change in the weather proved to be a harbinger of good luck. Near the Sri Pada viewpoint, an alarmed group of sambar deer caught the attention of the film crew. The crew quickly prepared their gear to start filming. As luck would have it, a large male leopard appeared out of the blue. This was our first sighting of a highland leopard in Sri Lanka. As the crew continued to film the leopard, it settled down near the bushes. This bold leopard seemed to be in no hurry, and it wasn't disturbed by our presence either. These highland leopards are much stockier than the lowland leopards of Sri Lanka. The physical differences are no doubt an adaptation to the cold weather at Horton Plains. After a while, the leopard stretched and disappeared into the jungle. As the misty condition increased, there was no visibility to see a leopard at all, even if it did decide to reappear. Pretty soon the mist enveloped the whole area. The show was over. There are other animals that inhabit this park. Known as the bear monkey due to its thick fur, this monkey is a subspecies of the purple-faced langur. Rare reptiles like the endemic rhino-horned lizard and pygmy lizard can be seen too. Another endemic lizard found at Horton Plains is the black-cheek lizard. Normally found at elevations of 1,000 meters and above, they are generally seen on rhododendron plants and gorse bushes while hunting prey, such as insects that feed on the nectar of flowering plants. In fact, scientists have conducted research on the association between black-cheek lizards and their preference for inhabiting invasive gorse bushes as opposed to native plants. In this scenario, invasive plants may be beneficial for these lizards at Horton Plains. Furthermore, 3 out of 4 mongoose species can be found at Horton Plains. This is the brown mongoose. The striped-necked mongoose, the largest mongoose species in Sri Lanka, inhabits these plains too. Around 90 bird species have been recorded at Horton Plains, including common highland endemics like the dull blue flycatcher and Sri Lanka white-eye. Horton Plains is also home to the elusive Sri Lanka whistling thrush. This bird is very difficult to see, mostly because it's restricted to cloud forests. Countless birders have visited Horton Plains to try and see this bird, even though it is more often heard than seen. Regardless, Horton Plains is one of the best places to observe this shy bird. But an animal that's notably absent at Horton Plains is the elephant. Probably the last person to give a detailed record of elephants at Horton Plains was German scientist Ernest Haeckel. Haeckel visited Horton Plains in the 1880s and was the first to illustrate the landscape of the plains. These are some of his paintings. Interestingly, Haeckel claimed that the elephants of Horton Plains would eat their way through the scrubs of the forest, marching one after another, thereby leaving an open trail behind them. Haeckel stated that these elephant tracks made it convenient for him to travel through the jungle. Haeckel also visited the famous World's End, a sheer cliff overlooking the landscape below. It's here that Haeckel saw wild elephants in Sri Lanka for the first time. He even produced this illustration of an elephant at World's End. To date, this is the only illustration to show an elephant at Horton Plains. Sadly, elephants gradually vanished from the area due to excessive hunting. British explorer and hunter Samuel Baker did a lot of hunting at Horton Plains during the 1800s. Not only did he hunt sambar deer, Baker also killed a significant number of elephants in the area. However, there is a waterfall named after him at Horton Plains called Baker's Falls, which is a major attraction in the park. Supposedly, this waterfall was discovered by Baker while he was hunting sambar deer. Today, there are no elephants at Horton Plains. Not only elephants, various toponyms suggest that other mysterious animals may have inhabited Horton Plains. For instance, there's a grass species that grows in these highlands called Gawara mana, which suggests a particular animal may have once roamed these plains. In 1681, Robert Knox referred to this animal as the govera, which resembled a bull. In 1840, Major Jonathan Forbes wrote that one of the range of plains between Nuwara Eliya and Adams Peak was called Gawara Eliya. Forbes further states that 50 years ago, which would be around 1790, a large, fierce animal called the Gawara was captured here. He then confirmed that this creature was certainly extinct in the country. It's believed that this animal inhabited the Horton Plains region. Of course, the animal Forbes is referring to is the gao. Also called the Indian bison, the gao is now only found in India, Southeast Asia, and the Malay Peninsula. So, what happened to the gao in Sri Lanka? It's believed that hunting and deforestation in the hill country for tea cultivation caused the extinction of the gao. The last record of a gao in Sri Lanka was in James Emerson Tennett's book from 1859. In the book, he mentions an old man who resided near Horton Plains, recounting a sighting of a gao. Supposedly, the old man claimed that the gao was between an elk and a buffalo in size. Sadly, the days of the gao at Horton Plains are long gone. In 1969, Horton Plains was declared as a nature reserve. Ultimately, in 1988, it was elevated to the status of a national park. Today, Horton Plains is one of Sri Lanka's most popular national parks. No doubt, the beauty and mystery of these plains will continue to attract people in the future.